Mia had always loved traveling and discovering new places, so when she found an affordable Airbnb in a secluded cabin deep in the woods of Vermont, she jumped at the chance. The listing promised breathtaking views and solitude, perfect for her long weekend away. Upon arrival, the cabin looked even better than the photos. It was quaint, with rustic wooden beams and a stone fireplace. The host, a man named David, greeted her warmly. He seemed friendly enough, sharing tips on nearby hiking trails and local attractions. But there was something unsettling about his gaze, too intense, as if he were assessing her. "Enjoy your stay," he said, lingering just a moment too long before heading back to his car. The first night passed uneventfully. The sounds of nature surrounded her, and she drifted off to sleep listening to the rustle of leaves and distant animal calls. But around 2 a.m., she woke to a loud noise outside, a crash followed by a deep, guttural growl. Heart racing, she peered out the window, but the darkness swallowed everything. The next day, shaken but determined to enjoy her trip, Mia explored the area. She met a few locals at a nearby cafe. Their faces tightened when she mentioned the cabin, David's place. "You shouldn't be there alone," one woman warned, her voice low. "He's strange. There are stories." Curiosity piqued. Mia pressed for details, but the locals quickly changed the subject, casting wary glances toward the door as if expecting David to walk in. Dismissing their warnings as small-town superstitions, she returned to the cabin. That night, Mia decided to sleep with the lights on. Just as she was drifting off, a tapping sound broke the silence. It started softly but grew louder, insistent. Fearful, she got up to check the door but saw nothing. Just as she was about to return to bed, her phone buzzed, a message from David. "Hope you're enjoying your stay. Let me know if you need anything." Chills ran down her spine. She hadn't given him her number. And easy, she tried to distract herself with a movie, but the tapping continued, now accompanied by low whispers that seemed to echo through the walls. They sounded almost like her name. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Panic clawed at her as she realized she was utterly isolated. The next day, she packed her bags, intent on leaving. As she checked out, David appeared, a smile plastered on his face. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, the warmth in his voice now unsettling. I didn't feel comfortable," she stammered, avoiding his eyes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have no idea how lucky you are to be here. Most don't understand. The forest has its secrets." Fighting the urge to flee, she forced a smile and left. As she drove away, she felt a strange sense of relief until she noticed something in her rearview mirror. David stood at the edge of the property, watching her go, the smile still frozen on his face. When she got home, she tried to forget the unsettling experience, but something lingered in her mind. Weeks later, she stumbled upon a local news article about a missing hiker, a woman who had stayed at David's cabin a few months before her. The article mentioned that her belongings were found inside the cabin, but there was no trace of her. Mia's stomach dropped as she read that the hiker had been last seen just days after booking her stay. That night, she received another message from David. "I hope you'll return soon. There's so much more to discover." The phone slipped from her hands as she stared at the screen, a chill creeping down her spine. She had booked her stay long ago, but now it felt like she'd been chosen for something far more sinister. As she lay awake, the whispers from the cabin echoed in her mind, and she knew one thing for certain: some secrets should never be uncovered. Jess had always loved the idea of unique stays through Airbnb. So when she found a charming, isolated cottage in the woods for a weekend getaway, she couldn't resist. The reviews were glowing, and the pictures showed a cozy space, perfect for unwinding after. When she arrived, the host, a man named Mark, greeted her with a warm smile. He seemed friendly and eager to help, but Jess couldn't shake a slight unease that lingered in the back of her mind. He mentioned how much he loved the forest and the solitude, but there. After settling in, Jess decided to explore the cottage. It was quaint, with vintage decor and a beautiful view of the surrounding woods. As she wandered through the rooms, she noticed a few odd things: a camera on a bookshelf facing the living area, and a small device that looked like a speaker mounted near the ceiling. She brushed it off as a part of the homes. That evening, Jess relaxed with a book, but the uneasy feeling returned. She couldn't shake the thought of the camera. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she decided to investigate further. Searching the living room, she found another small camera tucked between some books. This one was hidden better and made her heart race. Fighting the urge to leave, she resolved to confront Mark the next day. She wanted to give him a chance to explain. But sleep was hard to come by that night, and every creak of the house sent her pulse racing. The following morning, Jess decided to go for a hike to clear her head. She needed to get away from the cottage, from the cameras, and from the feeling that someone was watching her. After several hours in the woods, she returned, feeling a bit more at ease. But when she walked through the front door, Jess's heart sank. The living room was in disarray. Cushions were askew, and the coffee table was cluttered with her belongings. Panic surged as she realized someone had been in her space. Had Mark come by, gathering her courage, she decided to call him. He answered quickly, sounding cheerful. "Hey, just checking in, how's the stay so far?" Jess hesitated, feeling the weight of her discoveries. "I found some cameras in the cottage. Is that normal?" There was a brief silence on the other end before he replied, "Oh, those are just for security. Nothing to worry about." Something about his tone sent chills down her spine. Jess felt trapped, and her instinct screamed at her to leave. "I think I'd like to check out early," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you sure? I can help you with anything you need," he said, but his cheerfulness felt forced. Jess ended the call and frantically packed her things. As she hurried to the door, she noticed the speaker device she had seen earlier. It looked different now, almost like it was blinking. Panic surged again. Was it recording her? Just as she was about to leave, she heard a rustling noise coming from the back of the cottage. Gathering her courage, Jess crept toward the sound, praying it was just a squirrel. But when she peered around the corner, her blood ran cold. Mark stood there, his face twisted into an unsettling smile. "I thought you might want to see the footage. I've got some great clips of you exploring the cottage." Fury mixed with fear surged through Jess. "You're filming me without my consent." Mark's smile widened. "It's all for your safety, you know. I just want to make sure my guests are happy." She bolted past him, heart racing as she ran to her car. She jumped in, fumbling with the keys, desperate to start the engine. Just as the car roared to life, she glanced back at the cottage. Mark stood on the porch, watching her drive away, that same eerie smile still plastered on his face. Once she reached a nearby town, Jess immediately reported him to the police. They took her seriously, but when they visited the cottage, Mark had vanished, leaving no trace behind. Weeks later, she learned that he had done this before setting up hidden cameras in the homes he rented out. The case became a local news story, and Jess felt a shiver run down her spine every time she thought about what could have happened if she hadn't trusted her instincts. From that day on, she vowed to always double-check any place she stayed, knowing that not every charming rental is as safe as it seems. In the spring of 2021, a young couple, Emily and Jason, decided to escape the bustle of city life for a weekend getaway in the woods. After days of searching for the perfect spot, they stumbled upon a secluded cabin listed on Airbnb. The pictures showed a charming rustic retreat surrounded by towering pines and a serene lake. The reviews were glowing, with guests raving about the tranquility and the beautiful surroundings. However, there were whispers of something strange lurking beneath the surface, but Emily and Jason brushed those off as overactive imaginations. Excited for their adventure, they booked the cabin without hesitation. The host, a middle-aged woman named Helen, reached out with a warm welcome. "You'll love it here. Just remember to respect the woods, they have their own secrets," she wrote, a hint of mystery in her tone. As they drove through winding roads surrounded by towering trees, the excitement built. The cabin loomed ahead, a quaint structure nestled in the heart of the forest. Helen greeted them with a friendly smile and a basket of homemade cookies. "Welcome. I hope you enjoy your stay," she said, her eyes flickering with something that made Emily uneasy. After settling in, they explored the cabin, which was cozy and well-appointed. That evening, they lit a fire and enjoyed a dinner of grilled vegetables and steak. As the sun set, the woods around them transformed, casting long shadows that danced with the flickering light. Later, as they sat on the porch sipping wine, the peaceful ambience shifted. An unsettling feeling crept in, as if the forest was alive and watching. Emily mentioned it casually, but Jason shrugged it off. It's just the woods. You're letting your imagination get the best of you. As night fell, they decided to retire for the evening. Just as Emily was drifting off to sleep, she heard a soft tapping sound coming from the window. Startled, she sat up and listened, but the sound stopped. She dismissed it, attributing it to branches brushing against the glass. The next morning, Jason woke her with excitement. Let's hike to the lake. I found a trail just behind the cabin. Emily reluctantly agreed, and they set off into the woods, the sun filtering through the leaves above. They spent the day exploring, swimming in the cool water, and taking photos. But as the sun began to set, a heavy fog rolled in, blanketing the forest in an eerie hush. They hurried back to the cabin, the feeling of being watched intensifying with each step. That night, while rummaging through the cabinets for snacks, Emily discovered a trapdoor in the kitchen. Hey, check this out. She called to Jason. Curiosity piqued. They pried it open and descended the rickety stairs into the darkness. The basement was damp and musty, filled with old furniture and dusty boxes. In one corner, Emily found a small trunk. Let's see what's inside, she suggested. They opened it to find old photographs and journals belonging to previous guests. One journal caught Emily's attention. Flipping through its pages, her heart sank. The entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing the writer's descent into paranoia. The last entry read, "I can feel them watching me. They want something, I don't know what. Let's get out of here," Jason urged, sensing her unease. They climbed back up, but the whispers of the woods seemed to grow louder in their minds, echoing the journal's warnings. That night, as they prepared for bed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The tapping at the window returned, more insistent this time. "Jason, did you hear that?" she whispered, her heart racing. "Just the wind," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. They locked the windows and tried to sleep, but sleep eluded them. Around 2 a.m., Emily awoke to the sound of soft crying coming from outside. Heart pounding, she shook Jason awake. "I hear something." "It's like someone is crying," she whispered. "Stay here," he said, getting out of bed. He moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. "There's nothing there," he assured her, but the unease lingered. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the cabin, making them jump. The sound seemed to come from the basement. What was that? Emily gasped, panic rising in her throat. "I'll check it out," Jason said, but Emily grabbed his arm. "No, let's just leave the cabin. We can drive back home." He hesitated, then nodded. They quickly gathered their things and crept down the stairs, but as they reached the door, it wouldn't budge. It felt as if an unseen force was holding it shut. Panic surged. "It's locked. What's happening?" Emily cried. Jason pressed his weight against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices pleading and wailing. "Help us! Help us!" They echoed, and shadows danced along the walls, forming into indistinct figures. "Get back!" Jason shouted, pulling Emily away from the door. They backed into the kitchen, searching for a way out. In a moment of desperation, Emily remembered the trunk in the basement. "The journals, maybe there's something in there that can help us." They dashed back to the basement, the shadows swirling around them. With trembling hands, they riffled through the trunk, searching for anything that could offer guidance. Just then, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlight. Darkness enveloped them, and the whispers intensified, now sounding like tortured souls crying out. "Join us. Stay with us, please. We just want to leave," Jason shouted, his voice trembling. Emily found another journal, this one filled with drawings of strange symbols and rituals. "Look, this might be it," she said, flipping through the pages frantically. The drawings depicted a way to appease the spirits that haunted the woods. Following the instructions, they gathered items from the trunk: a candle, some herbs, and a piece of cloth. They set up a makeshift altar in the basement, their hearts racing as the shadows pressed in around them. As they completed the ritual, the air thickened, and the shadows coalesced into vague, tormented figures. "Help us, you can't leave," they wailed, reaching out with elongated fingers. With a final chant, Emily and Jason held their breath, and the energy in the room shifted. The shadows recoiled, and a blinding light filled the basement, pushing the darkness back. The wailing turned into shrieks, and the figures dissipated into the air. As the light enveloped them, they felt a rush of wind, and suddenly the door flew open. They raced up the stairs, the cabin now eerily quiet. The atmosphere felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. They sprinted outside, the cool night air hitting their faces like a wave of relief. They didn't stop running until they reached their car parked down the gravel path. With trembling hands, they fumbled to unlock the doors and jumped inside. As they drove away, glancing back at the cabin, they could have sworn they saw a figure standing in the doorway, watching them leave. Back in the city, Emily and Jason struggled to shake off the haunting memories of their weekend. They learned that Helen, the host, had vanished shortly after their departure, and the cabin had been taken off the rental market. News reports spoke of strange occurrences and disappearances linked to the location, warning others to steer clear. Though they tried to move on, the experience left scars. They had escaped the cabin, but the shadows of that weekend lingered in their minds, a chilling reminder that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed. Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you have similar stories you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.